Hi, Dan.
Hello, Dom.
Can you hear me? Let me get you in full screen for a second.
And such a delight and humbling for me to interview someone who's been interviewed by the likes of Terry Gross and William F. Buckley Jr. I don't think you've made it to Oprah yet. Is that right?
No, no, no. I was way back when. This would be it's a long time ago. So it's just 30 years ago. She was having a Good Friday. Um, what would you call it? Interview with people on miracles. And this was when the Jesus seminar was just starting off, and I was clearly to be the bad boy. I was
Right.
supposed to be the debunker, as it were, and there was two other people who were on who were going to speak for miracles. And it's the only time I really declined, to be honest with you. I declined because I knew what was going to happen. And what happened was when I watched it, the two people who were on were saying things like, I was taking luggage to my friend in an open truck and it started to rain. And when I got there was no rain on it. And I lost my wedding ring and I was raking leaves and I found it. And you know, I have nothing to say to that. Those are what I call, opposing that is what I describe as machine gunning butterflies. They're little, they're not spirituality. They're butterflies. You don't go after that. It's it's the big miracles that I'm interested in, not the small ones. So I declined. That was the only time I ever declined anyone.
Well, you've heard me, I think, probably say this before. That I first encountered you at the Berkeley lectures. I think it was January of 1995, if I remember correctly.
Yes, a good
And
line.
you had been invited because your book on the historical Jesus had become a bestseller after being
Yes.
featured by the New York Times and all of that. But that's not why I went,
Yeah.
right? I I did not. You know, I had, yeah, I discovered that I had a book of yours that was required reading in seminary. I don't remember reading it actually,
Okay.
but I went because my good friend, Dr. Hyung Kyung Chung, was also speaking there, and she had become a sensation at the World Council of Assembly the year before, and so they
Oh,
invited her in because she and I went to seminary together. We graduated together, and so I went to hear her, and I was actually spellbound by you. She was delightful too with her Korean, Asian theology mixture of Confucian
okay.
theology, and had us all these ministers doing these exercises that absolutely delightful. But at any rate, so I started buying all your books. You're right,
Sure.
reading everything I could. I'm not ashamed. Became a bit of a Crossan groupie. Went to hear you speak whenever you were in Oregon, at Trinity Cathedral in
Yeah.
particular.
Those days.
Yeah, the Turner Lectures up in Washington, Orlando at another ministers group. More recently, Albuquerque with Richard Rohr, and of course, going on that tour of Turkey with
Yes.
Borg. So that was so delightful.
That was the fun.
Yeah, yeah, and
Glad we got Turkey before it was impossible.
yes, right, right. And then had you speak at our centennial for at the building of First Christian Church, and thank you again for that. That was just so delightful. But anyway, I retired from preaching, still working, but retired from preaching and needed something to do with my weekend. So I started this blog,
Yeah.
as you know, and I used one of your aphorisms as the name of the blog. One of many of which, for which you are known, justice is the flesh of love, and or the justice is the justice is the flesh of love, and love is the spirit of justice, right? Or the other one I love, charity may get you canonized, but justice will get you crucified, right? Anyway, Emmaus never happened. Emmaus always happens. And I remember, and I told you this story, when I first encountered that in this exchange between that your publishers had arranged, we would get a new email every day or every week, one written by you, one by Marcus Borg, and the other by Luke Timothy Johnson.
I
And
remember that.
yeah, I think it was a little unfair to Dr. Johnson because it was the two of you kind of ganging up on him. But anyway,
Exactly.
You stated, you were talking about how in this one parabolic afternoon described in Luke 24, Emmaus never happened, Emmaus always happened. And I'll just never forget Marcus's response with this exuberance of how he wished he had come up with that, right? At any rate, but you said that that wasn't the first time you used it. So just tell us a little bit of that story of how that saying came about.
And I'd have to go back over myself to find out when it was first said. But it was so obvious for me in reading Luke 24 that whoever had created this, and I don't think Luke created it, it was clear to them that they understood that the presence of Jesus was not something that happened on Easter Sunday or a few days later, that two people are on their way, and one of them is identified as a male. So I always presumed in Mediterranean courtesy, if you will, or discrimination, the other person was the wife, because you do not introduce the wife, you introduce the male. So let's say a couple, and they're kind of missionaries, and they're going to their home, and Jesus suddenly appears, and we're not supposed to be surprised. Where is he appearing from, heaven or wherever? And they chat along the way. He gives them a graduate course in scripture exegesis. And then they come to where they're home, I presume. And he's going to keep going, of course. And they have to invite him in. That's the key point. They invite him in. And then he takes the food and he does the Eucharistic break. He takes, bless, breaks, gives. And at that moment, they recognize him, and then he's gone. And there's no story of them, going around seeking under the table and under the chairs to find where is he. So whoever made up this story knew exactly what they were doing. They were saying Jesus is present, and your hearts are warmed when you're explaining the scriptures, but you don't see Jesus present until you invite the stranger into your home. I thought this was so obvious. That people knew what they were doing, and nobody worried about where Jesus disappeared to or anything else. So I think this is the permanent presence, because that story didn't seem to me something that just happened on the way to Emmaus. It seemed to be a video bite, let me use, of the reading of scripture and the breaking of bread. But of course, it's the stranger who's invited in who turns out to be Jesus, as it were, if you push it. So clearly, it couldn't happen just once. It jumped out at me as so different from all the other apparition stories, which were very much to you or to this one or to that one, or who's in charge here or who saw it first. This was, none of the 12. And so it seemed to me almost like the most important of all of them, the most enduring. And it struck me then, and just came probably when I was writing it the first time. And honestly, I'd have to go back and try and figure out, did I say it sometime before that? Because I'm not certain that was the first time I ever said it. It may be.
Yeah. I think there was an interview that you had done in connection with the publication of your book after it was featured on the New York Times bestsellers, or I guess it wasn't the bestsellers. Yes. That's not the point, but it was this interesting thing that you, and I believe it was Raymond Brown, two Catholic scholars, both wrote books in the same year on history.
John Meyer. It was John Meyer.
Oh, it's John Meyer. Okay.
John Meyer's big, the ongoing, it's up to 5 volumes now, and at least 2 more coming. It was John Meyer's first volume had come out that November of 91. And he was at the SBL, and so was I. And my book was coming out, The Story of Jesus, Life of a Mediterranean Jewish Peasant. And everyone thought, including me, that his book was coming out. I thought it was a book. What it was the first part of a 7-volume work. I could never commit myself to doing a multi-volume anything, because I'd be afraid by the time I got to the last one, the first one would be totally out of date in my mind.
Sure. Yeah. And in fact, I note that you have talked about how your views on Paul in particular have changed. And so let's talk a little bit about that and those tours of Turkey that you've taken. So how many tours did you do with the Borgs?
We did, well, we did at least 10 of Turkey, at
Wow.
least 10. We did one of Italy, one of Israel, three of Ireland, Celtic Christianity. So we started in 2000. What happened was Marcus and Marianne had been going to Israel for the historical Jesus, and then they decided to do Turkey and Paul, and asked Sarah and I, would we like to be co-leaders? And we said, well, that means kind of we get to go free. And they said, yeah, that's the idea. And we said, yep, all we need is 40 people, and 4 of us will be able to go free in terms of, the planes and everything else. So that's what we had to do. So every year we took 40 people around Turkey. But to go back to your opening question, I wasn't interested particularly in Paul, to be honest with you. It wasn't negative. It was just I was interested in Jesus, historical Jesus. Paul was, I came to the Catholic tradition, so Paul was the minor part of Peter and Paul. That's all one word in Roman Catholicism, Peter and Paul, in that order. Never Paul and Peter, Peter and Paul. They were like the hero twins of Christian Rome, like Romulus and Remus, in that order always were the hero twins of pagan Rome. So I grew up in that tradition. We had a feast day in Ireland of Peter and Paul. So Paul was never what it was for Marcus, say, coming up in the Lutheran tradition or the Protestant tradition. I wasn't particularly interested. So after we did Excavating Jesus with Jonathan Reed and myself, we began to joke about it. And it was a joke, honestly, because his brother had said to him, now I suppose you're going to go right through the 12 apostles and excavate each one. So excavate Peter, excavate James. And so we were laughing at excavating Paul. And my comment was, I'd be happy to do it, but does that mean I have to read him? So Jonathan said, well, I tell you, you do the exegesis and I'll go to a nice Mediterranean beach and dig up something. But it was a joke. Now, what happened then, leaving that joke there, in 2000, as I said, we were invited to start doing tours in search of Paul in Turkey. So all of a sudden, I found myself reading Paul in the ruins of the Roman Empire, through the ruins of the Roman Empire, not in this argument about Romans and whether justification and all the Reformation mess that they had made of Paul. So I began to read him not in Reformation matrix, but in Roman matrix. And all of a sudden, what happened, very simple, is the whole thing clicked into place. All of a sudden, these debates about that I found silly in Romans, justification. Am I justified before God? Poor Luther. How can I possibly be justified before God? I began, Dikaios Sune is talking about justification of the world. He's not talking just about you or me. We are included, of course. If the world is justified, then so are we. But it's not after private justification, it's cosmic justification. And of course, that's the business the Romans were in. They thought they had established it. So you see Augustus with the orb in his hand, and he has made the world a just place, which is what justification means. Dikaiosune in Greek, justificatio in Latin. So Augustine would have said, if he was talking to Jesus, or say Claudius talking to Paul, but Paul, we have justified the world. We have established Dikaiosune. That's what we do. That's our business. The business of Rome is just, so all of a sudden, Paul just stepped into place. And then I found I could read Paul, making absolute eminent sense, as long as I read him in the Roman matrix, not the Reformation matrix, because I was asking him questions he wasn't interested in. So every year we went back, and we didn't try to just go where Paul went, like Ephesus say. We went where we could see his world most clearly, whether he ever went there or not. So, for example, Aphrodisias became the place we wanted to go, or anywhere we could see the Roman world, whether he went there. In Aphrodisias, for example, there was an avenue 30 feet high, a thin avenue with, I can imagine when you went down there, your neck would be sore looking up. And what you were seeing was Greek myths, conquered nations, imperial things. You were getting a magnificent propaganda, dear Greeks. Your destiny was to be Roman. Welcome home. Magnificent art, magnificent propaganda. This was what was imperial, Roman imperial theology. And yeah, I wasn't talking about emperor cult or Roman civil. This was Roman imperial theology. And in the light of Roman imperial theology, Pauline Christian theology snapped into place like that. It was like, two things suddenly coming into focus. It all made sense. So it was, strictly speaking, going around all of these places in Turkey, especially in Turkey, more so even in Greece, to be honest with you. Because a lot of the places where Paul was in Greece, like Thessaloniki, you can't, there's a big city sitting on top of it. It was, Turkey had more options, more room that you could see Roman ruins. Better than Israel. That's why we went to Israel once, to be honest with you. A small country that was almost destroyed in the first century. Turkey, big wide country and stuff all over the place still, first century stuff. So we love going, that's where Paul made sense to me.
Well, and for me, that moment where it just really clicked for me was in Priene, with that beam.
Yes.
Yes, right, and the saying there. So remind me what that says.
Okay, let me tell you that. Let me give you the backstory. But we were on a tour, and Priene wasn't on our tour. We were going to pass Priene. We were down, I think, somewhere south, and we were going back to Kushadasi. And we asked with the tour, with our 40 people, and we said, could you drop us off at Priene? We want to take a look at it to see if it might be of interest next year when we come back, and we'll send a taxi from the hotel. So they dropped the two of us off, and there was a Anglican priest from Chicago said, can I come? Come on. So we're wandering around this place, and he suddenly shouts, come over here, come over here. I didn't find it. We have this giant beam with letters this big. And what it says, it's a dedication that used to be the architrave above the door, and it's fallen down, and they've set it up so you can read it. And it says, the people, the Hodemos, it's in Greek, dedicate this to Athena, patroness of the city, Athena, and to Imperator, it's autocrator in Greek, Caesar, the Son of God. It's the same word used for in Mark's opening, Theou Huios, the god Augustus. So Imperator Caesar, the Son of God, the god Augustus, Sebastos. And Sebastos is from the Greek root sebomai, to worship. It's the word you get the god worshippers in Acts from. So the god to be worshipped, it's left hanging. Well, aren't the other ones to be worshipped? Or is this the God to be worshipped? Yes, of course, all the others. So Sebastos, Augustus, we kind of got used to it. That's his name, like Mr. and Mrs. Augustus's little boy Augustus or something. But it's really a transcendental title. It means the God to be worshipped, especially in Greek. Augustus, Sebastos means the God to be worshipped. And so at that point, again, we said, oh yeah, we're coming back here every other year. We did. But we literally stumbled over that. I didn't know what we were doing. We were wandering around Priene. I don't think we had done any research. We didn't even know we were at the temple of Athena, the main temple of the city. I think we just stumbled on it.
Yeah, and that's what's just so fascinating is just, that's almost this accident of.
We didn't discover it. The whole world probably knew it was there, but we actually saw it. Later, when I went looking at books, I found, people knew it was there. And in a lot of books, we saw it wasn't transcribed properly. They left out one part of it. It was the Son of God, the god Augustus, Theo Huios, Sebastos. So it was the full panoply. Now, one other important thing there, we would think that surely Son of God, that's the most important title. But the title that always comes first is that Imperator, autocrator in Greek, Imperator in Latin. We translate it as emperor. And it really doesn't mean emperor because it's said, for example, that Augustus was declared imperator 10 times or 20 times. I would translate it as conqueror. And of course, when it's used of Augustus, it means world conqueror, because nobody else is going to get that title. It was the old title that was given to a general on the field of battle after he had won the victory. And if he wanted to have a triumphal march in Rome, the first question was, did your soldiers on the field of victory proclaim you imperator? So not emperor, not ruler, victor would be the proper translation, I think. Augustus, then, it's world conqueror. So the most important thing for Roman imperial theology actually is not Son of God even, or God Sebastos. What justifies that as a transcendental titles is that you have conquered the world. And that we want to say, come on, all you've conquered is a bit of the Mediterranean or a swath of the Levant or something. But they don't talk about conquer of Italy or the Mediterranean, it's the world. And that gorgeous marble statue in the Hermitage Museum in St. Petersburg shows him holding in the rod of command in his right hand. It's a rod, goes back to the spear of command, but the rod. And then the world, the orb of the world's in his left hand with victory, Nike, on top of it. So for them, what justified their title as Son of God, God Sebastos, all the rest of it, was victory. And again, you see that we're talking about Aphrodisias, that's the whole thing of that avenue of victory. So the motto for Rome, and I think I'm being quite fair, is that they would say, we have established world peace. They wouldn't say they would not have said we're at the conquest. They would have said, we have established peace through victory. That would have been their motto, as it were. We're interested in peace, a just world, of course, after we have pacified it. It'll be just, but we will control it, and we get it through victory. And they would have said, honestly, I think they'd have kind of been surprised. You'd say, well, what other way do you get peace? They really would have said, quite fairly, tell me another way that has ever been. You know, the Assyrians, the Babylonians, the Medes, we just got really good at this. This is the process. This is civilization, they would have said. Now, you got this way over here on the Levantine coast of the Mediterranean. There's these strange little people who've been around for a long time and who've hung in there as empires come and go and flow through them, and they're still there. They haven't disappeared into the gene pool of the Middle East like the Edomites and the Moabites and all the other ones. And they have this strange idea that you get peace through justice. I mean, what a weird idea. Where's the empirical evidence? It's not around. No one's ever got it. But their insistence is that their vision of God, you do not get peace through victory. They would have said, if I could put my words in their mouth, you just get a lull. Because they knew enough. You can see it in the book of Daniel, chapter 7. They could tally off, I mean, you know, the Babylonians, the Medes, the Persians, the Greeks. They could go through the list of empires. They all come and gone. They believed the same would happen to the Romans, by the way. And they all had thought, of course, they would last forever. And they said, no, peace through justice is how you get peace. So all of a sudden, we have at least an alternative. We have a different vision, which hadn't been there before. So when I'm studying the Torah and the prophets and Jesus and Paul, what I'm seeing here is a cosmic vision. I mean, you can mock it, you can laugh at it, see, stupid, you know, power is what controls the world. Forces controls the world. You get it through victory. They're talking about a different vision. Now, it's also a vision, I think, which at least explains how come we're still not under the Assyrians, or the Babylonians, or the Medes, or the Persians, or the Greeks, or the Romans. Why empires have always come and gone? Wouldn't you say, well, you finally get enough power? So it's these two, clash of these great two tectonic plates of history that I've been fascinated with.